Thanks for your attendance. We are quorate. Just like to announce that today's meeting is being filmed for live and subsequent broadcast by the way of the Council's internet site. The images and sound recording may also be used for training purposes within the Council. As you will see from the agenda papers, generally the public seating areas are not filmed. However, by entering the meeting room and using the public seating area, you are considering it to be filmed to be possible use of those images and sound recordings for webcasting and or training purposes. Proposed public speakers have been made aware of the broadcasting arrangements prior to this meeting. Will members please use their microphones to contribute to the meeting, and please remember to switch off microphones when you are finished. Also, could you ensure that you refrain from using any mobile devices during the planning committee, and any mobile phones, iPads are switched off or on silent. Thank you very much. Do we have any apologies? No? No. Okay, thank you. Declarations of interest? Councillor Evans?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Can I declare an interest in item number 3 on the agenda for transparency, please? The enforcement issue at Hampshire Avenue. I've had contact with both the complainant and the perpetrator as part of my ward duties, and also met with a planning enforcement officer. I remain impartial and open-minded, and I'm free to stay if you're content with that.
Yes, that's good, thank you. Next on the agenda is the minutes of the meeting held on the 6th of July. Can we have somebody to propose a correct? Thank you, Councillor Howell. Second. Councillor Jordan. Okay, now we go into the planning application schedule. Item number 1, application number 22/0526, and this will be presented by Stephen Williams.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. Okay. Okay. Right. Okay, testing, that's great, thanks. That's a good start. Okay, I'll just share my screen. Okay, the site is located on a car park in town. It's located between Hill Street and Park Square, which is to the west of the town centre. The car park and the general area slopes down as you travel from west to east. The proposal is to erect 12 self-contained apartments, and the scheme is to provide accommodation for people who are currently homeless, and the units will be managed by Link Cymru. The application has been reported to Planning Committee because the scheme is major development, and I trust that you have all received the late representation report that I emailed through to you all yesterday. So this is an aerial photo of the site before development commenced. So you can see Hill Street to the north, and to the south is Park Square, and the units are being constructed to the right side of the car park there, so to the east side. To the east of the site you've got Mount Zion Church, and some residential properties here. Obviously residential properties on this side, and this is a listed building here, which is known as the Victoria Road United Reformed Church, now occupied by the Islamic Society for Wales. And then to the south of the site, there's a park, and then a multi-storey here. So just a street scene view before development started, and this is taken from Park Square. So you can see the vehicular access into the car park here, and this is where the units have been constructed here. And then taken from the other side, from Hill Street. So in this, onto Hill Street, there's only a pedestrian access, and this is where the units are being constructed. This is a pre-existing site plan before development started, so you can see the extent of the car park that was there. And this is the proposed layout. So you can see part of the car park has been removed to allow for this development to be constructed. It's a two-storey terrace, providing single occupier accommodation. 6 units on the ground floor and then 6 upstairs. Vehicular access is to remain from Park Square, and pedestrian access to Hill Street has been retained as well. So the existing car park had 56 spaces and 31 will remain. It's just a colour photograph of the proposed development there. The section, so this is sort of looking from Park Square, so you can see the topography of the area, the way it slopes down. And then just some floor layouts. So you can see this is the ground floor. It's got a combined living, kitchen, dining room with a bedroom and a toilet, and it's the same upstairs. And then just a section through the units. What you can see here is that the first floor is served by this terrace, which is accessed via flights of steps on each side. And then the car park has got this safety barrier to prevent cars from rolling down into the building. This is how they would look. Front elevations on the top and the rears on the bottom. So you can see the terrace on the front there with railings, and then on the back you've got sort of Juliet balconies with solar panels on the roof. These are the side elevations, or the gable elevations. So render finish, but they're going to have like a steel mounted terrace to support climbing species on each elevation to sort of green those elevations up. So just a CGI. This is with Hill Street in the foreground. So you can see the greening up of the gable. This is the cycle store here, and you can see that's going to have a green roof. And there's the external flights of stairs that will lead to the terrace. And then this is with Park Square in the foreground. And again, you can see this is the bin store, and that'll have a green roof as well. Just to take you through some photographs. So this is looking from the rear towards the multi-storey and the nearest residential units here on Park Square. And again, that's looking down on those residential units. Privacy is not a concern because of the distance, and you can see there's no garden that's being looked down upon. And then that's just looking further then to the left, down towards Mount Zion Church. And then this is the units inside, sort of partially finished. And then photographs looking from the front terrace. So these units you can see are Hill Street. And then that's looking up towards the Unit Reformed Church. And then obviously the development is nearing completion. So this is a photograph of the units from Hill Street. Again, Hill Street. This is the bottom end of Hill Street, looking up. And then this is taken from the bottom end of Park Square. And then moving up Park Square. As you can see from the top of Park Square, it's screened to some extent by street trees. On this plan, just note that the blue edge is the conservation area. It's the St. Willis conservation area. So the site is within that. It's not within the town centre conservation area. And there are buildings of interest in the area. So here's the building. To the west, there are the nearest listed buildings are, as I mentioned, the United Reformed Church, which is this building here. Then behind that, you've got these units, residential properties, which are also listed. Then these two properties at the top of Hill Street are listed. This building is a building of interest, but it's not. It's known as a landmark building, but it's not in the conservation area, and it's not a listed building. So, as you have read from the officer report, the conservation officer has objected to the scheme on grounds of layout, not respecting the street pattern, design and materials. And you'll be aware that there was a previous application reported to the Planning Committee in December, which was refused on those grounds, concern about the impact in the conservation area. So the developer has gone away and tried to improve the scheme to try and mitigate those concerns. So what I've done here is just a scheme that was presented to the committee last December, and the scheme that's presented to you now. So you can see the sort of the improvements that have been undertaken. So the main changes would be the bin store here on Park Square is now covered, and it's got a green roof. The gable elevation has got this trellis system with climbing species, so to soften this. They're proposing additional tree planting here, and also an evergreen hedge adjacent to Park Square. You also notice as well is that what was previously proposed was a sort of a low wall with railings, but they've now sort of upgraded that to provide a wall with sort of pillars and then railings in between that. So a more robust boundary treatment to deal with sort of the visual side of it, but also improve security as well. And then, I'm just focused in on the bin store there. As you can see, what was proposed was sort of an open bin store area, and now it's enclosed with this green roof. And you've got a better view there of the change in the boundary treatment as well. And then this is from the direction of Hill Street. So you can see that this was the scheme presented to the committee last December, and this is the scheme presented to you now. And again, the changes are this trellis system on the gable elevation. They've introduced a cycle store, a covered cycle store, and that would have a green roof as well. Some design changes to the external staircase there, and again you can see the change in the boundary treatment. More tree planting, and again introduction of an evergreen hedge adjacent to Hill Street. And I'll just focus in there to give you a bit more of an understanding of the changes. And this is just the change to the elevation. So the top picture is what was presented to committee in December, and this is the lower one is what's presented to you now. So you can see that it's now continuous railings rather than this arrangement where they were split. So to sort of help you assess the impact on the conservation area, the agent has undertaken some CGI imagery which shows what it will look like when it's complete. This is the image taken from the top end of Park Square. As you can see, it's screened to some extent by the street tree that's there. And then that's taken at the entrance of Park Square there. And then from the bottom end, as you can see, the hedge, the planting, and obviously the climbing trellis with planting on the gable there. This is taken from the top end of Hill Street, looking down. Again, you've got trees that do sort of mitigate to some extent. And then this is with the pedestrian access. You can see the impact of the walling and the landscaping and the hedge. And then finally looking up Hill Street. So just to say on conservation, I think there needs to be, there's a planning balance to be had here. So acknowledging the conservation officer has expressed concerns, the developer has gone away and sort of tried to work up a scheme that softens the development. The conservation officer has expressed concern about the layout of the development, that the scheme hasn't been built sort of in accordance with the existing partner development. In other words, adjacent to Hill Street and Park Square. But setting it into a site like this has reduced its prominence. And the development is of a modular type construction. It's not a traditional build, so it's not possible to construct it on a slope. It's had to be constructed on a flat surface. So it wouldn't have been possible to sort of do that anyway, but ultimately it's set into the site. We think it's less prominent, which assists and mitigates the concerns. I think really important as well is we need to strike a balance between conservation and housing need. So this development is obviously being brought forward by Link Cymru to deal with housing need and a significant issue in Newport with the problem of homelessness. And that's a significant material planning consideration that you have to bear in mind, I think. Moving on, so community safety. So residents have expressed concerns about crime and antisocial behaviour. In response to that, the first thing to say is that the scheme is managed by Link Cymru. It's going to have a panel that would select tenants, and we've got a planning condition imposed, which is in the report, which would ensure that that is the case and is controlled in that fashion. The scheme has been altered as well from the previous one, just looking at various issues in terms of, well, I've already mentioned the boundary treatment, but also introduction of security doors. The CCTV cameras have been altered, so you've got 3 CCTV cameras, which are in pink on this drawing, and lighting has been provided, or would be provided as well, where there's the cycle store here and the bin store. In terms of, that's just an image of the waste arrangements. So you can see the covered store there with bins, and it would be within 10 metres of a lorry to pick that waste up. In terms of parking, the site is very sustainable. It's within easy access of the train and bus stations in town and all the facilities and leisure facilities in the town. So there's no parking proposed. but as I say, it's very sustainable, and we don't feel there's any justification to require any parking. The highways officer's got no objection, stating that the loss of the parking would actually reduce traffic movements. So I'll leave it there for now. Obviously, if there's any questions, then you can ask. But just to conclude, we're recommending the plan permission be granted. Thanks.
Speakers now. Okay, thank you, Stephen. Before we go into any questions, we'll ask the speakers, please. Scott?
Thank you.
Sorry, to remind you, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm Scott Sanders. I'm the Chief Executive of Link Cymru Housing Association, and we've been a trusted partner with Newport City Council, along with other housing local authorities across Wales for many, many years, providing high-quality, affordable homes and healthcare provision. And as a housing association, we have a clear purpose, which is creating the right environments for people to flourish. As we all know, there is a huge pressure within Newport and other local authorities to be able to house the amount of people required in affordable homes. And within Newport itself, there are over 9,000 people on the waiting list. And this continues to grow, sadly. But we have a shared endeavour between us, which is about trying to tackle the national and local housing crisis. The site in Hill Street provides a great opportunity to deliver additional 12 permanent affordable homes for people currently living in council-funded temporary accommodation. And the importance of moving from temporary accommodation to permanent accommodation cannot be overstated, as it's central to improving people's well-being, allowing people to settle and make life choices. Also, a reliance on temporary accommodation will only continue to present a growing cost for the council and local taxpayers at a time of budget pressures and rising costs of living. As has been mentioned, as a housing association, we are investing in modern methods of construction, and we're able to deliver more homes more quickly and to ensure residents have low-carbon permanent homes at low outgoings. Hill Street is a great example of how this approach to construction can take place when you have the right partners. Construction is less invasive, disruption is more limited for neighbours, and build quality is vastly improved. And the partnership with Newport enabled us to jointly bid to Welsh Government for capital funding to bring this project forward, supplemented by our own private finance. We have negotiated a long-term lease with the council car park and feel that using the surplus parking spaces to build urban homes is a sustainable solution that is much needed. The permitted development rights introduced by Welsh Government during the pandemic allowed us to start on the project a bit sooner than normal, ready for occupation at the earliest opportunity. And I recognise that permitted development rights are not well understood outside of planning circles, but Welsh Government was quite specific in stipulating their use to reduce the number of people currently housed in temporary accommodation. We have listened to councillors, residents and council officers, and since the decision back in December, we've taken steps to enhance the physical appearance of new homes and how they relate to the surrounding area. We've also engaged with the local community, including a public event, to hear the views and take on board people's observations and thoughts. We have, as you've just heard, agreed additional sustainability measures, such as greening the exterior walls, installing sedum roof for the cycle and bin stores, increased planting to front boundaries, 13 new trees, and many other improvements. And the officer report, as just detailed, outlines what is happening further beyond that. I would wish to point out that there have been some inaccurate information circulated about the 12 new residents who would move into these homes should permission be granted. The new residents will be people in temporary accommodation, but capable of living independently, perhaps with low to moderate support needs. This does not include homeless people from the street or people with severe addictions. For example, I'm aware that 5 of the 12 applicants who would like to move in are currently employed. We will, of course, be guided by the housing team to ensure that we are tackling the affordable housing needs of Newport, and will manage the homes and tenancies through our local specialist teams in conjunction with any floating support services that may be required from time to time. I was very pleased to see that Eden Gate from 25 Hill Street provided support for this scheme, unmitigated support, not only just to do with the move from temporary to permanent accommodation, but more importantly to do with the sensitivity of the design and the importance of new technology and low bills for people living in permanent accommodation. Newport's councillors and staff have been very progressive in promoting this approach, and I know that Welsh Government and other local authorities are very keen to follow your example. And I would personally like to thank you for taking this approach and ask that you please consider the officer report and the information we've supplied to accept the recommendation to grant consent. I know there are 12 people waiting to move into these permanent homes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Smack on 5 minutes. Well done. I would now like to call on Councillor Al Nuami to speak, please. Would you like to turn your camera on and microphone?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you, colleagues.
Sorry, before you start, Councillor, you have 3 minutes, okay?
Sorry, how much?
Is it 3 minutes? Sorry, there's no time limit.
Did you say there was a time limit?
No, sorry, you have no time limit, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. I will be brief anyway. Yeah. I think my comments I have put on the report, Chair, and that is, as you can see in section, where are we? 6.3.1, going to 6.38. When we looked at this application back in December, and I do admit that actually the current application is an improvement, though in my view it has not addressed the issues of how it fits within the conservation areas. And that was the main reason for refusal at the time. Let me make it absolutely clear that I am fully aware of the homelessness problem, of the need for housing, temporary, permanent, and emergency in Newport. You know, any other councillor, you know, representing a city centre ward would be, you know, would be deaf if they won't see that or appreciate that. I get lots of plea for help for housing, you know, temporary housing, permanent housing, and all that. So you know, I'm fully supportive that we should do something about it, and I would applaud any opportunity to do that. But you know, we have a lot of people on our waiting list. The figure being quoted to me is about 9,000. So 12 is, you know, a drop in the ocean. Though of course, you know, like we say, every little bit help. I would support that project normally, but I think Link Cymru and their agents have not really used the opportunity of the passing 7 or 8 months to actually do sort of try and address the issues that were highlighted by the conservation officer. The conservation officer, sorry, Chair, please just, I'm getting a signal that my battery is running low. I don't understand that. And I don't want to be put off, so just trying to. Okay, I think yeah. Apologies for the interruption. Okay. So you can see really, it's highlighted what the conservation officer is saying, both in paragraph 634 and more significantly, I think, 636, where the conservation officer makes it clear that, you know, we could have achieved even better density and better sort of facility, you know, to house our people, had they not sort of stuck with this modular approach. But of course, they really stuck with this modular approach because it was decided a long time ago. And that brings another point, because really the resident that I've had complaining about, you know, why is the council allowing the continuation of construction when actually the planning permission was refused in December? I know we can talk about permitted development rights, but to people, they see that the council has refused planning, but the construction was allowed to continue. I know that that can happen, but for the council sort of to be, to be seen, let's say, to be perceived as complicit in that is not a very good message that we as a planning authority should be sending. That's another point that really made a lot of our residents unhappy to see happening. Now, looking at the new design, and I listened carefully to Mr. Williams' presentation, yes, there have been some improvement, but really, the building don't sit comfortably in there. The design does not sit comfortably in there. And then for there to be claimed that there's been some misinformation about what the units are for, I think it's correct to say, and I think we should know that Link Cymru themselves have changed their mind about the kind of client that they were planning to put in there, because initially they were coming with a supervisor, 24-hour supervision of the people they were planning to put into those units, which suggested really that the people who needed that were people, homeless people with possibly problems that they needed to be helped with and so on, and that's why they proposed the supervisor. Now, I believe they've deleted the supervisor, and I think according to the last speaker that I heard, it seems that now we are going to use these units to basically help with those people who are already in temporary accommodation and need to be moved. So hopefully the EU colleagues will try and establish, precisely what is happening there, who is going there, and why is the supervision post that was initially part of the application appear to be deleted. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. If you could turn your camera back off now, please. Thank you. Before we move on, I just want to make sure that all committee members have received a late representation pack yesterday that went out. Yeah? Okay, thank you. So I think we now open the floor up to questions. Councillor Mogg.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to apologise for being a few minutes late and check whether that precludes me from voting.
We have discussed it, and because you was just on time, we're going to give you the benefit of the doubt. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Sorry. Any questions? Councillor Reynolds.
Thank you, Chair. Just two quick questions, really. One is to do with the photo that was shown a little bit earlier, demonstrating the improved privacy as you're looking out towards the multi-storey car park. I'm probably aiming this question at Mr. Williams or our side. The photos seem to be taken from ground level from the car park itself. I'm just wondering, has that privacy issue, does that alter from the view from the terrace or from the first floor in terms of overlooking gardens of those neighbouring properties? And the second question is to do with the residents that may go into that property. I understand that Link are going to be vetting or interviewing those applicants, so I understand that. I just wonder whether, is it possible to go into a bit more detail about what the criteria might be and what support might be available to them if they need it? I understand that the people going in will have less needs of support. Does that necessarily mean they won't need any support? And if they do need some support, maybe outside of normal office hours, late night, weekends, what might be available to them? Thanks, Chair.
I'll bring the photo up so everybody knows what we're talking about. So that's the photo. Yeah, okay, well, Tracy took that photograph and she confirms that that was taken from first floor. Yeah. And that's from first floor. And I mean, the point as well is that the distance between these back units, obviously the standard distance is 21 metres, and it meets that distance, and it's overlooking these sort of garage roofs. It's not looking down onto a private garden anyway, so we really don't have concerns about the impact on the neighbours in terms of privacy. Yeah, your second question, I think, is probably best aimed at the housing officer, who I think is attending the meeting online.
Okay, could we ask Kath Owls, please, to respond?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I can confirm that 16 people have been considered for the first lettings of the scheme, and they've been selected on the basis that we don't think they have any high support needs, but they will be assessed on an individual basis, and floating support would be provided if required. And I can also confirm that they've been selected on the basis of having a variety of age, being from a variety of age groups, and a good mix of the sexes as well. But we would work in conjunction with Link and the Housing Support Grant team to provide floating support if that is identified as being required.
Okay, thank you. Are you happy with your replies?
Yeah, thanks very much.
Okay. Councillor Jones?
Yes, thank you, Chair. 3 questions, unfortunately, for everybody, but the first 2 I'll start quite easy. One was concerning the roof material, what it's made out of still, and with the solar panels, the energy being used off those panels for sustainability. Can you just tell me how much energy is they're producing? Second is flood risk with the drainage, because it is on the hill. I know it's been discussed previously on the previous meeting, but can we just re-establish those facts, please? 3, at the previous meeting it was rejected, and I'm just a little bit confused because maybe I've missed a point here somewhere. I believe in the first meeting, construction for this project was already started. It came to planning, it was rejected. The building's been continuation and hasn't been approved yet. So I just need some help here. Why is it going ahead, keeps getting built, and why that's when it was rejected? It wasn't even put before planning when it was started. So I'm a little bit lost, really, how we could build these things. It might not get agreed today, they get refused, but we're still building. And I haven't been updated when it was after rejection. I didn't have an update of anybody saying we're going to continue building it and hopefully make some superficial changes that will get it passed next time. So as a planning officer, I'm a little bit confused. So maybe I'm not doing my job diligently enough, but I need some help here to understand what goes on with this process, please.
Okay, well, if I answer your last question first then. So when the development started, it was had the benefit of permitted development rights that had been introduced by Welsh Government during the pandemic to deal with or to try and help get homeless people off the streets, to deal with the emergency at the time. So those permitted development rights have sort of existed until literally this month. They expire this month. So up until this month, the scheme was permitted development, didn't need planning permission. So there's no action you could have taken if you wanted to. But the second point I was going to say was the scheme is being progressed by Link Cymru. The risk is theirs. So the fact that they are ploughing on and developing to try and finish the scheme is at their own risk. Like any development that takes place without planning permission, what we will do is ask the developer to submit a plan application to assess it. And it's only in a situation where it's refused that you would take enforcement action. You wouldn't just take enforcement action without going through that process. So it's at their own risk. They're doing this at their own risk, really. In terms of the roof material, I think it's a metal construction. Just see if I've got that.
So, Steve, yeah, it was metal last time. I think one of my objections was to the noise of rainfall, heavy rain, and the noise pollution from it. And it's one of the major concerns that we turned it down because we wanted the roof to be reconstructed of different material.
Yeah.
Now, I've not seen that being adjusted. I've seen some extra trees, bit of hedge, superficial stuff. But the roof was my main concern last time, if you look at your records, and I don't think that's been addressed at all.
Do you know, Fund?
While Steve's confirming the roof and material, all I can say is that I've been inside these units, and the ceilings are plasterboard painted finish, so you won't get the noise that you would get from just a, almost a conservatory-like roof, with it's exposed there. So they're fully insulated. You're not going to hear any noise inside those units from any rain.
I appreciate that. It's more so, yourself on industrial units with these type of roofs, tin roofs. When we have heavy rain, which we do, and we recently have, they do create noise pollution outside of the building as well for the residents. So that's what his main concern was, not only for the inside, but the outside. If you go to an industrial area, these roofs, especially up in Cumbrae, same manufacturer, tin roofs, they make a clatter when it's heavy rain. So we just have thunder and lightning, and I can tell you now, they will be making noise pollution in that area. And being in a conservation area, my main concern last time was the construction of the roof was not satisfactory to what we should be looking at. Sorry.
Pretty sure it's a metal type of construction, but I'll have to look it up. Sorry.
Yeah, I believe it was. We did discuss it, and that was one of my. I can see the trees and the hedges and the bin cover, but the roof was my main concern, and the flooding for the drainage because it's on the hill. So that was. I just reminiscing on my last meeting with yourselves on this point. That was my 2 points I brought up, I believe.
Sorry. Yeah. In terms of the solar panels question, I don't know the answer to that, I'm afraid. I don't think that information has been provided to us.
No, it's great to see there. And obviously, they're going to enhance energy and the green effects and whatever else. But when we look at this as a returning application, I don't think we really address some of the issues that was discussed before. Even though, like, I don't want to repeat myself again, but superficial green trees, hedges, great. But there's some other major concerns we discussed and we turned it down on. But I don't think they've been addressed. Maybe it's because of cost element, or maybe it's already been built, which I find really strange that if I built something, it'd be knocked down at my own cost, I know. But being a council partner building this, there should have been an understanding only go so far or not at all until they come again in front of planning. So I find it very strange that we allow these things to happen with council partners, but if it's a public, we wouldn't allow it to happen. So, sorry, that's my view on it.
Okay, Tracy.
Thank you, Chair. So just to point out that in paragraph 1.3 of the report, it does talk about the emergency permit development rights and the expiry date of that. So I don't want everybody to get too focused on the fact that they continue construction, and we didn't stop them from doing that because they were very entitled to do that. So I think we just need to make sure we put that into some perspective. As Steve says, they've done that at their own risk. If committee were to refuse permission today, then clearly then they would need to explore appeal options, which they are doing with the first refusal, and on this option as well. So just request for committee not to get too sidetracked by that issue. But in terms of the roof, there are solar panels on the roof, so it's not completely exposed residential tile roof. But these are manufactured industry sort of used tiles. They're not bespoke to this development. So I've got some comfort that they wouldn't be manufacturing using this sort of system on a residential roof if it was producing the concerns and the effects that you're worried about. I can't clearly tell you that it's not going to produce any noise, but certainly these are available on the market for this type of development. Certainly they wouldn't be used if there was a noise issue arising from them.
Thank you for your answer. Yes, I understand that. When you say they went ahead and constructed within their rights at their own risk if it didn't go past on today's voting. Have we got documentation that you've written to Link Cymru saying it is at their own risk? If it didn't pass today, they would have to stop and take it down. Have we got documentation that we sent to them on this fact?
I'd like to say yes. I couldn't put my finger on it now, but I think they have proceeded, and we've obviously worked in partnership with them because, as you say, we've leased them the site. That's proceeded at risk, and Link have been fully aware that if permission is refused, then the development would need to be taken away. I'm very confident that they got that message loud and clear.
So if we have got that documentation, obviously, if it could be forwarded to me, if anything goes wrong, right or wrong today, that'd be great. But so that documentation should say if it doesn't pass today, they have a certain time limit, they would have to dismantle it.
We would then be moving into enforcement territory, so we would then be saying to them, you have X amount of time to remove the units, and we would be proceeding with enforcement notice because it doesn't have consent. However, there are appeal options that they would no doubt, I'd be confident that they would be exploring before we get to the point where we'd be issuing enforcement notices. But we would move it into the next stage of basically enforcement investigations then, and go through that process of issuing a notice if it wasn't voluntarily removed.
So with the appeal application, if it did get refused today, does that mean it goes outside of the council to sort of Welsh Government and they'll be brought in to oversee?
Yep.
So would that be favourable to Cymru Link, in their proposals? Is it because of the COVID reasons and the housing reasons? Do you think it'd be more favourable? So what I'm trying to say is we rejected last time, we've come back today. If we reject it again today, are we saying there's still possibility, still going to go ahead no matter what the planning officers here and the council, if we reject it, so we could still get outvoted?
Oh, absolutely. If we refuse this today, they have the right to appeal to the Planning Environment Decision Wales, and an inspector will be appointed to determine and arbitrate really between the council's position and the applicant's application. Clearly all the documentation will be provided to the inspector, so they'll see the officer's reports, they'll see the members' reasons for refusal as well.
I appreciate your answers. Thank you very much for your time. My only concern is obviously if it did get rejected today and it does go down that route, is the cost of the Newport City Council and the taxpayers. So it's a balancing act really, but I must admit I've still got some reservations on the construction and the site and the way it's been presented previously to the committee. So, okay, thank you for your time and answers.
Councillor Jordan? No? I thought, was it? No? Councillor Watkins?
Thank you, Chair. I got a number of questions. First of all, you still mentioned that it's a modular construction. In the previous application, it said that there was a period of time where the construction would last, but it doesn't, state anything in this application. That's the first question. The second question is, in this application, it says that the formal abandonment of a sewer which runs across the development, there must be a formal abandonment of that sewer before construction starts. Obviously, the construction has started and practically finished. So I'm assuming that formal abandonment detail has been completed. The other thing is, this application has changed totally from the previous one, in as much as under COVID-19 emergency powers, it was the development for the homeless. That is no longer being a development for the homeless. It's taking every other application into consideration as well. So I'm a bit concerned about this, because during COVID-19 applications, any development could have come across as saying this is under emergency powers of COVID-19 to get the development passed and built without the application of planning committee approving it. The other thing is a concern that nobody from the planning committee and authority notified the planning committee that this development was going ahead and the reasons for why it was going ahead. It's only the fact that rumours came out that it was under emergency powers of COVID-19. Well, I believe that the planning committee and members of the planning committee should have been informed about that, because members of the public were approaching committee members of why is it going ahead when it was being refused. And technically we had no official reason from the planning authority or the officers that the reason it was going ahead. The other one, the last thing, is sustainable travel. I don't see any contribution to sustainable travel within this application. We got education, we got housing, but nothing about sustainable travel. And that's all, Chair. Thank you very much.
Do you want to?
So Steve and I do a bit of a double act with your questions, Councillor Watkins. So I'll talk to you about why committee weren't notified of the development. I mean, essentially, lots of press statements and releases were done about this site and what was happening with the site and the basis upon which the development was proceeding. So that information was in the public domain. We don't, as a matter of course, tell committee about developments which are on the horizon or coming to us or potentially going to happen. That's not the role of committee. Committee are here to determine applications that should be presented before you as part of the agenda. We are very open and always amenable to conversations and to give you information, but that's not part of our procedures to sort of almost give you the heads up before applications actually come before you. So if you have any questions or queries about it, I always welcome you to sort of come to us and ask about that, because we can give you the correct and the accurate information, but we don't, as a matter of rule, all the time you've been on committee, Councillor Watkins, we don't give you heads up about applications which are on the horizon or potentially coming forward, no matter how controversial they are, because we do deal, as you know, with a number of controversial applications.
I understand that, but what concerned me is the fact that we refused it on the planning application. So everybody assumed that development would not go past. But obviously it continued to be built, and we didn't know the reason why it was being built. I understand about the heads up about applications and what have you, but this was an application which we refused, and therefore it should have stopped the development until such times that it was reapplied for or whatever. But no, it just carried on being developed. So I think that the planning committee should have been and explained why it was continuing.
I think my personal think that Councillor Jones asked the same question and the other answer has already been given.
With respect, Chair, no, the answer wasn't given. The answer was given to the fact that, it was done under emergency powers. I understand that, but my concern is the fact that the committee weren't told that it was done under emergency powers. That's all. In future, if it, God forbid, I hope it don't happen again, we are told the reason why the planning application continues to be built after being refused. That's all. Thank you. I accept.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks. We'll note that for future reference on any other. Okay. Thanks.
Okay. I'll try and answer your other questions. The first question was reference to the fact that it's a modular type construction and that there was an indication on the previous application that there was a lifetime on it, and there is no mention on that in this one. I must admit, I can't find reference to that. As far my understanding is that, yes, it is a modular construction, but I've not been alerted to any issues about its robustness. So we're not sort of imposing a condition that it's temporary, because as far as we're concerned, the construction is reasonably robust. Moving on to the issue of the abandonment of the sewer. So there's a historical sewer that runs across the site, and Welsh Water have alerted Link Cymru to this. And Link Cymru are in the process of dealing with this with Welsh Water. The understanding is that the sewer is long defunct. It's no longer in use, and Welsh Water have verbally confirmed that. But nevertheless, there's a formal process to be gone through. So it's almost a tick box exercise for Link Cymru. What I will say is that it's really not a planning issue, because it's just an apparatus that needs to be dealt with. It's a private matter between Link Cymru and Welsh Water. It's nothing to do with. It has no purpose for the development. It won't cater for the development, so it's not really a planning issue. Third one was trying to remember exactly what you were saying now about the COVID-19 and the homeless. I think what you were saying was that on the previous application, that was a significant issue, and now it's not, because obviously the pandemic, we're seeing the back end of it. Obviously the pandemic did exacerbate these issues, but homelessness hasn't gone away. If anything, the problem is increasing. So whilst those permitted development rights that were introduced in the pandemic have now fallen away this month, the issue of homelessness remains, and Link Cymru are obviously trying to deal with that, and that's why they've applied for planning permission. They know that permitted development rights are coming to an end. They need planning permission. And in terms of sustainable travel, there's no offer of any contributions to sustainable travel. That I would confirm. But what I would say is that the development is highly sustainable. It's located bang in the centre of town, where all the facilities and public transport links are. It's not envisaged that residents would have cars. There's no parking for them. So it's probably a sustainable development as you'll get. Reading through the various documentation, the type of construction is quite sustainable as well. They've got solar panels and high standards of insulation. So yeah, that's my answers to your questions.
Just a comment, Chair, for that in regards to the modular construction. Most houses today are developed through that system, so I've got no objections to that at all. Only the fact that the materials being used for the roof, as Councillor Jones mentioned. The other one is the committee now can assume that this is not, or this is a permanent development, not a temporary one.
Yeah,
okay. That's
correct, yeah.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, before we go on, there are a couple of others who want to ask questions. I'd just like to, it's a bit out of context, we don't usually do this, but would Link know what the lifespan of the, could you answer that?
I'm afraid I don't have an accurate answer to the lifespan, but we're certainly investing in it from our own money on a long-term basis, so over 30 plus years. So it's a permanent home which should run for considerably on that time.
Okay. If you could ask and maybe supply us with a written answer at a later date.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So can we now go on to Councillor Linton?
Thank you, Chair. Just one question regarding the photograph that you had looking down off the top, overlooking the garage roofs. Right? Are there going to be any trees planted in that area to act as a break in between that and the garages and the properties below the town?
Steve will just pull the plan back up so you can see what the boundary treatment is going to be.
Sorry, I missed it. I only just noticed when you had the...
Yeah, apologies, I didn't show this to you earlier, but this is the planting plan. I don't know how well you can see this, but this, yeah, there's various shrubs and trees being planted to each sort of side of the building. There's an evergreen hedge then that would run to the sides facing Park Square and Hill Street, and then also to the rear elevation as well. I'll show you the CGI imagery, perhaps it'll show it as well. And then on the back, it's mainly grass, and it's going to be sort of shrubs. It's not proposing trees towards the back there. Just show you the CGI.
That's at the rear elevation where they look over. Front, in the front elevation.
With me, it's here somewhere. There you are. No, that shows the back look. As you can see, yeah, the vegetation is largely to the sides. It's mainly sort of grass to the rear. But you've got this evergreen hedge there.
Yeah, there's a little hedge. Well, at the top, it would be nice to have had some trees, so to block off, overlooking. Do you know what I mean? Overlook that area.
From Hill Street, is it?
Yeah, just by there. That's why I thought. I was wondering whether there would have been any trees over on that elevation there, but there isn't, is there? By the looks of it.
Yeah, so this is the view from the bottom of Hill Street. So you can see the glimpse of the building there. So tree planting here isn't really going to figure in the street scene that much. And then from the bottom of Park Square there, okay, you've got a better view of it there. But again, the rear is sort of out of sight, screened by this. So that's why the vegetation has been, landscaping has been concentrated to the sides rather than to the back.
And obviously, in future, all these plants, the trees will be looked after on a regular basis, so if it gets vandalised, they'll be replaced and things, because obviously this is area that's softening the landscape a bit. That's the idea of putting them in. So as long as they've got the maintenance plan in and built in with it.
Yeah.
So we make sure that they do keep that up.
Yeah, I'd say that there's a condition that they would have to provide this landscaping and maintain it. The standard is 5 years on any development. We ask the developer to maintain it for 5 years. After that, it just becomes their responsibility then.
Okay. I think as well, regarding the roof and modular buildings, the roofs itself, under the building regulations, the approved documents have got built into it for sound, insulation and the like. And these type of roofs is totally different from an industrial roof. These roofs are on plenty of houses in Newport and Cumbrian, so obviously there's been no problems there with this type of construction.
Okay, is that the finish of your questions?
Sorry?
Have you finished your questions, Councillor?
Yeah, that's the question. I'm just trying to answer regard to the roof.
Okay.
I'm in agreement with the officers on this one. I approve this because I think it's an improvement on a car park, which is very nice. So, and regarding the conservation area, you've got modular buildings just down the road and in other areas just around by there as well. So, yeah, I'm with the officers on this.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Mogford.
Thank you, Chair. Maybe my question's been answered because I've heard the words permanent in 30 years. But my question is about the modular buildings. How long do they actually last? How long are they designed to last for? And what levels of maintenance need to be carried out to keep them in tip-top condition? Because we did hear about quality buildings. So part of the question might have been answered, but I just want to represent it.
Sure.
Thank you, Chair. So I think we're not entirely sure exactly what the lifetime of these units are. I mean, I've certainly heard figures of 100 years. And obviously the public speaker has said at least 30, so it's somewhere in between, but we can obviously confirm that separately. But what I would say is obviously this is a link development. They would retain ownership and management of those units. The people that would be in there would be tenants. So in terms of maintenance, it would be, you know, well managed in accordance with their existing company operation and how they manage their existing portfolio of property. So from that perspective, you know, I don't have any concerns on that.
Thank you.
Do you want to come back, Councillor Linton?
Sorry, Chair, just saying all the building elements and fabric have got a life cycle built into it, the roofs, the walls and everything else. So this is still longevity. It's not just going to go overnight, you know what I mean? It's like 25 years or something like that, 50 years,
Okay,
60
thanks
years.
for your input. Councillor Jordan?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just a quick one. With the car park itself, is it still being used as a council car park as well for people, or is it just only for residents who actually stay in their properties?
Sorry, I'm taking over now, Steve. Apologies, don't normally say much. It's still retained as a council-operated car park.
Okay then, thanks for all your questions and your concerns. The recommendation for this application is granted with conditions. Could all those in favour please raise a hand? Okay, lovely. Thank you. That's unanimous. So, it's confirmed that the recommendation is granted with conditions, and thank you all for your input. Okay. Okay. We now move on to item number 2, which is application number 220657, the St Julian's Ward, and this is going to be presented by Grant Hawkins. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. So this application is for the change of use of 287 Cullion Road from 2 flats to 4 apartments with associated external works. The application has been called to Planning Committee by councillors Hoorheim and Townsend over concerns in relation to the overdevelopment of the site, which would result in an adverse impact on parking and highway safety, and the impact on antisocial behaviour and issues with rubbish and recycling. So the property is an end-of-terrace, bay-fronted building, as you can see on this photograph here. This is the rear. It's been extended historically, so at the front it takes on the appearance of a 2-storey property, but owing to a change in ground levels to the rear, it takes on the appearance of a 3-storey property. The site is located on Cullion Road, which is one of the main arterial routes into the city centre, and is closely linked to junction 25A of the M4 motorway. The site is here, as you can see, just located in orange by the pin there. The site, this is a street scene viewpoint of Cullion Road. The application property is just this bay-fronted end of terrace gable property here. The site, like many along Cullion Road, has a small forecourt to the front, and then to the rear it has a garden area with off-street parking facility, which is accessed off Orchard Lane, an unclassified highway. So the top left-hand photograph here is Orchard Lane. This is the existing off-street parking provision with a single garage just located in the background here. The photo in the bottom left-hand corner, again, is the parking area, which is overgrown and unkept at present, and the rear elevation of the house, of the building. The bottom right-hand photograph is taken from the side elevation of the property looking over the rear garden. You can see there's a patio area here with slightly lower tier grassed area. Directly to the rear, over the other side of the lane, is the rear of a flatted development. And then in the top right-hand corner, This is the lower ground floor rear elevation of the property, and the photo shows here a canopy lean-to structure which is proposed to be removed as part of the development. So in terms of the existing site and floor plans, the existing building comprises of 2 3-bedroom flats which are set over 3 stories. Both flats are accessed by a shared access point from the front of the property here off Cullion Road. And at ground level, flat 1 is laid out, as you can see on the central floor plan, and there's a stairs down to the lower ground level, which is, occupies the remainder of that flat. At first floor, from the communal door, you enter the stairs, and at first floor there is the second 3-bedroom apartment. In terms of the existing site arrangement, as you would have seen in the photographs, is the parking area to the rear, access to Orchard Lane, with the existing garage, a higher tier garden area here, and then to the side there's a small outbuilding just to the front, at the side of the front elevation, where the cursor is there. So the proposal at lower ground floor is for a 1-bedroom apartment which is accessed via its own entrance door to the rear. So this is the lower ground floor, which you'll recall where that canopy structure was. So it's proposed to be accessed via this private door here, and has a layout including bedroom, bathroom, and more of an open plan sort of kitchen living area. At ground floor, the second apartment is proposed. It will be accessed via the communal entrance door off Cullion Road, and comprises of 2 bedrooms with an ensuite bathroom and an apartment living area. And then at first floor, there are 2 studio apartments proposed, which are accessed via the staircase. They're 2 separate units containing more of an open plan environment with bathroom accommodation. There are external alterations proposed as part of the proposed development. The external layout comprises of an increased parking area to the rear. So the existing garage structure is proposed to be demolished to make way for an open parking space here, and there are 2 further parking spaces here. Due to the change in levels, the retaining wall is being pushed slightly further closer to the property, which gives a greater depth to the parking areas, which will mean that all 3 parking spaces meet the required standard and dimensions for parking spaces that abut a structure. There is also 2 electric vehicle charging points proposed in the rear parking area. There is a secured cycle store proposed on the upper tier of the garden here, which you can see the details here. There are 5 Sheffield hoops which could accommodate up to 10 cycles within the structure. And then slightly further up, there is refuse stores proposed. So the details here are of the refuse store which each flat would have. So there are 4 units proposed in total. Throughout the negotiation of the application, the site layout has been changed, and it now accommodates a private fenced garden area for the lower ground floor flat for apartment 1. There are 2 reasons for this. Firstly, because it will provide with these residents with additional amenity, which you don't always have associated with converted flats. So that's a benefit, that they've got their own private garden area to use. And secondly, because it will be closed off with a fence, it will secure the privacy of the rear elevation of apartment 1. The original design didn't include any boundaries, and as this shared access and steps are utilised, there would have been views into the rear elevation of that apartment. So it provides further privacy for the residents of that property. And then finally, in order to provide an access through the site from the parking area to the front elevation, where the 3 flats on the ground and upper floor levels will access the property, it's proposed to remove the existing small outbuilding, which is located between the application site and 285 Cullion Road. So in terms of the assessment of residential amenity, each of the proposed units comply with or exceed the minimum gross internal floor area for converted flats as set out within the Flat Conversions SPG. So the table just shows the exceedance over and above the minimum standards here for each unit. So that ranges from a very marginal exceedance to an exceedance of 12 square metres. It is also considered that each flat has a layout which is acceptable and offers sufficient levels of outlook, natural light, ventilation and privacy. Overall, from the existing lawful use of the property to the proposed use, there would be a net reduction of 1 bedroom from the lawful use, and there is not considered to be an intensification of the use of the building that would result in a demonstrable impact on noise for the adjoining residential property. There is also not considered to be any adverse impact caused on neighbouring residential amenity by way of loss of privacy or disturbance, or adverse impact on the character and appearance of the area as a result of the proposal. During the neighbour consultation, a number of objections were received. A number of the neighbour objections have raised concerns in relation to the potential transient nature of future residents. However, this proposal is for an independent residential flats, as opposed to a house in multiple occupation. They're two materially different developments. There is no evidence to suggest that open market rental properties would result in an adverse impact. In any case, there is no indication that properties would not be sold if permission was approved. So whether they're rented or whether they're sold to private purchasers, property tenure is not a material planning consideration in any case. So overall, officers are satisfied with the impact on residential amenity and the character and appearance of the area. If we move on to parking and highway safety, which is another key issue which has been raised by residents and by both the local councillors, a number of these objections have referred to the recent refusal of planning permission at the property. So an application was received towards the end of 2021, and it was determined early this year. It was for a 9-bedroom house in multiple occupation at the site. So when this proposal was a delegated item, when it was assessed against the council's parking standards, that application generated an additional parking demand of 4 spaces, which needed to be accommodated on street. A parking survey was submitted with that application, and that demonstrated that the surrounding area was saturated and at capacity. So the application was subsequently refused on highway safety grounds. Whereas this application obviously is materially different. It's a different use of the property, albeit residential. The existing use as 2 3-bedroom flats generates a parking demand of 6 spaces for residents plus 1 visitor space. There are 2 spaces on site which accord with the parking standards. So the garage that we saw, due to the internal dimensions of it, it isn't classed as a parking space which is usable. It doesn't meet the minimum dimensions as per the adopted council standards. The proposed development generates a parking demand of 5 spaces for residents plus 1 visitor space in accordance with the SPG. So the proposal also includes the additional parking space due to the demolition of that garage, so we'll accommodate 3 parking spaces on site which accord with the council standards. As mentioned earlier, 2 of these would be supplied with electric vehicle charging points, and also a secure cycle store for up to 10 cycles, which would encourage more sustainable and active travel from residents. So when taken into account the existing lawful use and the parking demand generated by that, in accordance with the adopted parking standards, there is no increase in parking demand, and subsequently there's no demonstrable adverse impact on highway safety. I think I'll just take this opportunity to advise members that if permission weren't forthcoming today, then the lawful use of the property is as 2 3-bedroom flats, so that use could be undertaken without the benefit of requiring planning permission. So that is the fallback position that the applicant has. So that covers off parking and highway safety. And then if we move on to the Section 106 legal agreement, as the proposal generates an increase of 2 residential units, a financial contribution is required towards the provision of off-site affordable housing within Newport, and that's in accordance with Policy SP13. The applicant has confirmed their acceptance to enter into the Section 106 legal agreement, which would secure a £940 financial contribution towards that provision of affordable housing in Newport. So overall, officers do conclude that the residential amenity of existing neighbours and future occupiers is preserved in accordance with Policy GP2 and H8. There will be no adverse impact on the character and appearance of the local area in accordance with Policy GP2 and GP6. there is sufficient cycle and refuge storage provided on site in accordance with SP1 and Policy W3. When taken into account the lawful use, there is not considered to be any demonstrable adverse impact on matters of parking or highway safety in accordance with Policy GP4. And finally, the applicant has agreed to enter the Section 106 legal agreement to secure that £940 affordable housing provision, which is in accordance with Policy SP13. So overall, the officer's recommendation is that the application is granted with conditions, subject to that Section 106 legal agreement, and also seeking delegated authority to refuse the application if that legal agreement is not signed within 3 months of the committee meeting day. Thank you.
Thank you, Grant. We do have two speakers for this, and they are the board member speakers. Could we please ask Councillor Hurent to come forward first, please?
Okay, Mr Chair. Thank you, Mr Chair, for agreeing for me to speak this morning, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the committee and officers. As you recall, I'm sure, you looked at this back in, I think it was June, and at that point it was going to be a 5-bedroom HMO. The previous plan for a 9-bedroom HMO. Sorry, can you hear me okay? Better? Thank you. As you recall, you agreed back in June to reject an application for a 5-bedroom HMO on this site. The 9-bedroom HMO previously mentioned by the officer had previously been rejected, I believe, by negotiation. So what we're being asked to do this morning is look at what is essentially an 8-bedroom HMO, albeit it's now called apartments. It's going to be turned into very poor accommodation, which could be possibly asked to accommodate couples and essentially children and whatever else the owners or the lessees agree. I must ask the committee, do you consider this will be an adequate amenity for future occupiers? Because the residents in that area certainly don't. We're squeezing people into smaller and smaller spaces, and it's not really something a city that's trying to develop as a place to want to come to should be considering. If it is agreed, it would probably end up being a lot of short-term leases and all the problems that they incur. We have far too many HMOs in this area of Newport already. And since you looked at this application last, 234 Killian Road was also given the status of an HMO with all the car parking problems. I note that there's no car parking survey attached to this application, and it's certainly the case that the last parking survey in the area showed that the parking was virtually overstretched. For those who know the little lane that is being now suggested will have 3 cars coming up there every day, the residents in that area don't use the lane because it's so narrow that it causes more problems in its own right than it ever solves. As has been mentioned in some of the objections from neighbours, there are 3 unoccupied properties in this area at the moment, and when we talk to the residents, 2 of the residents have abandoned the use of cars because of the impossibility of parking reasonably near to their own houses. As you recall, that some of the parking areas were at least 150 yards away from the areas where the people were being asked to live. and I'd ask you to reject this morning on common sense grounds. The officers have made a good case why you should accept it, but common sense will tell you that this is not the sort of property that people ideally want to live in. They're being forced to live in these areas, and it's taking down the whole tone and the complexion of Killian Road, with the knock-on effect for the local centre and the local schools. Thank you for taking the time to listen to me this morning. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Shall I leave and come up?
If you could just go back, and then Councillor Townsend could come down. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Can everyone hear, by the way? Yeah. I mirror most of all of Councillor Hurain's comments. Many of the existing points regarding the previous application for a 9-bed HMO still apply here. This revised plan, although it has a lower number of bedrooms, the impact on the area is still significant. There is excessive parking pressure on a well-trafficked route, with surrounding streets experiencing high parking demand as well. Killian Road itself is a key route for the emergency services, and there has been at least one occasion where an ambulance was unable to get through because of the double parking on the road. There is a detrimental impact on neighbours' amenities, with the added problem of increased litter and clutter with recycling containers. Having been considered previously, this application represents a gaming of the system and highlights the flaws in Newport's HMO planning policy. I think what Councillor Hurain said before about common sense really needs to apply for Killian Road, because it's getting worse and worse, and people who live there are seeing their environment changed. So although we do need houses, we do need flats or whatever people need, but we don't need them in family houses in terrace streets. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Can we now go to the committee for any questions? Councillor Jones.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Having lived in the area previously, and I currently work in the area, I understand what the fellow councillors are saying here. I must admit, one of the previous meetings that we had with HMO down on the bottom of Killian Road near this application, and I think that took us over the recommendation on the margin from 10% to 14% because it got passed. So have you done a survey on the percentage of HMOs in that area now in relation to this application, please?
So this application isn't for a HMO. It's conversion of a building to flats, so that doesn't meet the definition of an HMO. A HMO would be a single residential property which has private bedrooms and shared facilities such as toilets, kitchens. This isn't for that. It's for the subdivision of the property from 2 flats to 4 flats. So therefore, the threshold for HMOs, the 50-metre radius that you're referring to, that isn't relevant to this application, and that isn't something that we would undertake as part of the assessment of this.
Thank you for your information. I was just consideration of the HMO ratio in the area, because I know it increased on the last application down on the Killian Road. Maybe I shouldn't say it because it's a different application, but my understanding of living in the area, working in the area, and being on planning and what's going on in the area, I support the councillor's reasons to be concerned on the changes that's been applied on this application.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Trevor Watkins.
Thank you, Chair. A number of things. One is you have contributions to housing, 106 agreements, but as the increase in bedrooms have increased, you've got nothing in regards to contributions to education. That's the first question. The other is, who actually owns the lane at the back, and who is supposed to maintain it? If it's NCC needs to maintain it, then I think highways should have contributions as well, as the other contributions, because we're going from 2 flats to 4 flats, and you've got parking facilities at the rear. That's all, Chair. Thank you very much.
Right.
I think that's probably a question for highways in terms of the ownership, so I'm not sure of that information. So I don't know if we've got a highways representative today. Do we? No. No. Okay. Yeah.
Can I just expand on that? Sorry, you got Sheaf Lane, a couple of lanes off Orchard Lane and Road and all that, and there's been disputes since the 1960s who takes ownership and shared contributions to repairs, and it has been logged with the previous councils that that area is of concern because there's no direct ownerships in documentation. So you got Sheaf Lane, I know for instance, it's not been taken into ownership by Newport Council, and other similar lanes and backyards, they have similar issues, I'm afraid, over the past years. So I don't think there is clarity. There might be now, you maybe found documentation, but I know going back 10, 15 years ago with a member of the family there, they tried to look into it and it came to a dead end, I'm afraid. So it would be great to find out who did own these lanes, because there will be maintenance if more traffic use it. But I must admit, I know the lanes. I've played up in that area since a kid. They are a little bit tight for vehicles, so I know that there are genuine concerns. But ownership, yeah, it's a mystery to most people in the area. Nobody knows who owns it because they have written to council previous times.
I think the ownership issue I wouldn't be able to provide clarity on, unfortunately. But I guess what I would advise is the property or the properties that are currently there, the 2 flats, they do currently have access to that property. It's not as though we're introducing a new vehicular parking area. There is an existing parking area there. I mean, it accommodates 2 vehicles in accordance with the council's parking standards. The proposal would generate an increase to 3 vehicles, in terms of the adopted parking guidance for the formal spaces. So all I would say is that it could currently be used by that property. It's just, we're effectively providing an additional space. So there could be an additional vehicle using it in theory.
I would just like to, sorry, Mark, I would just like to comment on that. If you drove down that lane and parked the 3 vehicles there in and out, I would imagine there'd be a bump, a scratch or whatever on the wall of the cars because it's so tight. If you park 3 cars next to each other to try and reverse out of there, I can tell you now, I would struggle to get my car parked there next to 1 car besides 2 cars. So I'm not going for a site visit, but in my experience, I would say 3 cars might park in this directly, but they come into the lane where 3 cars are parked there and the middle one tries to reverse out, that is going to, I reckon there'll be scratches. Sorry.
No, that's fine. I think the only other point I'd probably make is just to reaffirm that there is no increase in parking demand as a result of the proposal. So in terms of any net difference, when the existing lawful demand against the proposed demand, there is no increase. So just to clarify that point.
Councillor Reynolds.
Question about contribution to education because of the increase in bedrooms.
This development would be below the threshold that requires a contribution to education.
Councillor Reynolds.
Thanks, Chair. Without wishing to repeat some of the things that have been said about parking already, that was part of one of my questions. Although the provision is proposed for the parking, I think the reality is it's not used at the moment by the residents, as far as I can gather. It's very unlikely to be used by anybody who moves into these apartments. So the reality is, as far as I can see, it is likely to affect the parking on Cullinan Road. I also understand the legal side of it in terms of potential appeals if a provision is there, but then residents choose not to use it. How much is that within planning control? I understand that. But my main concern really is that although this property or this development doesn't legally fall under the definition of HMO, I get that. But again, it's the practical reality of it. The consequences are likely to be the same as far as I can see. The effect on the local community in terms of transient residents not be able to build up a community feel, breaking down the community feel because it's different people in and out all the time. If those people don't feel part of the community, they're less likely to feel any pride in their community, so you're likely to get more antisocial behaviour, litter, fly tipping, all the usual problems that are traditionally associated with HMOs. Even though, as I say, I know this isn't classed as an HMO, but are the effects likely to be very, very similar? My other question really is slightly different. In terms of the potential for the owner to sell the property, can you just confirm, if they were to choose to sell this property once they develop it into 4 apartments, would they then have the ability to sell it as 4 separate apartments or as a building, as one sale? Because again, that could have an effect on the community and the transient nature of people moving in and out of the area. Thank you.
I'll answer that last point. So they could sell them as individual flats. That's up to them. Clearly there would need to be some sort of management agreement or service charge for the communal parts, but certainly they could. There would be nothing in planning to stop them selling them as individual units.
Okay, thank you. I think your first part was comments and not a question.
I suppose it was Fraser's comments, but I am still a little bit unclear about the parking facilities, to be honest. Similar to what Councillor Jones was saying, it's a very narrow lane. It's not used at the moment. You can see that by the level of the overgrowth there. So I suppose my question really would be, are there any plans, provisions for improving that access so that it is used and it doesn't have an effect on the parking on the main road?
Okay.
At the moment, I don't see how
before we go on, we now have an answer for the highways part of things, so we might clear a few things up.
Yeah, so according to, well, I think Steve might be about to show up the records from our mapping system, but the lane is highlighted in red there, so that does imply that it is an adopted highway. So that lane to the rear is adopted according to the records that we have. Yeah, but bearing in mind that doesn't necessarily, the ownership query may still not be clarified on that, but it is adopted in terms of that maintenance adaptation, adoption of that. I guess moving on, Councillor, to your point about sort of improvements, it falls back to the fact that there is no, at the risk of repeating myself, there is no increased parking demand in accordance with the parking standards. So there would be no sort of justification to require improvement of that parking, the access to the site. But they have, because ultimately there's currently 2 spaces in a garage which isn't fit for purpose to be used as a parking space. And the proposal is increasing the depth of those parking spaces, so they're a minimum depth of 5.5 metres, which is the required depth for a parking space which abuts a structure. So in terms of that, there are 3 spaces which do meet the parking standards, whereas currently there's only 2 spaces. So there is an improvement of provision for an additional space. And you would like to think that if there is more space for those vehicles to park, then the likelihood is residents may be more inclined to use them. What we've also got, which you currently don't have on site, is at the minute there's a small outbuilding to the side of the front elevation of the property. So that means residents can't walk through to the front door from the parking area to the rear. So they'd have to walk all the way around at present, up to Orchard Lane, to the next street and across Killian Road, which the weather the weather we get is going to put people off. So they are going to try and park on Killian Road. This would be a natural instinct. What this proposal is, or has provided, is a new stepped access through the site, the removal of that additional side building so that there is a pathway directly to the front of the property. So if residents will park in that rear area, they'll have direct permeability through the site to access the properties, as opposed to at the moment, which is probably walking all the way around. So hopefully that would encourage people to actually use the parking as opposed to relying on Killian Road, for example.
Okay, Councillor Harvey.
Thank you. Mine's more along the lines of a safety aspect. It's, I see no provision for a fire escape because the ground floor flat and the first floor are all accessed via the front door. I was just concerned if there's a fire on the ground floor, the first floor flat.
Please tell me if I'm wrong, but that doesn't come under planning. That comes under building regulation?
Yeah, that's correct, Chair. So that would be a matter for building regulations or potentially under Section 257 of the Housing Act, which would be separate, which covers flatter development.
Councillor Perkins?
I'd just like to... What is the minimum square footage per person for living accommodation? Because we seem to be wanting to put people into smaller and smaller boxes. The one there is a very small flat.
If I just share my screen a second, what we've got, so the supplementary planning guidance, which is relevant to this application, is the flat conversions planning guidance document, and that looks at a desired minimum floor area depending on the number of bedrooms of a property. So I'll make this table a bit bigger, actually. I'll just delete that for a second. And I'll run through these figures for you. Is that clearer? Yeah, here we go. So the first unit would be a one-bedroom flat, and it's 51.2 square metres, the gross internal floor area. The minimum requirement, as per the SPG, is 45 square metres. So there is an exceedance of the minimum standard by 6.2 metres. Square metres, sorry. Flat 2 is a 2-bedroom, and for a converted flat of 2 bedrooms, the minimum requirement is 58 square metres, and we've got 70 square metres, so that's 12 square metres above. Then flats 3 and 4 are both studios, so for converted studio apartments, 32 square metres is the minimum. Now flat 3, it meets it. It doesn't really exceed it. It does meet it. Marginally exceeds it. And then 4 is almost an 8 square metre exceedance of those desired standards. So in terms of making our assessment, when we look at the size, all of the proposed apartments are in exceedance of the minimum desired standards as per the adopted guidance document.
Is that per person?
No, that's overall the gross internal floor area of the residential unit. So it goes off bedroom numbers as opposed to occupier numbers.
Okay.
Councillor Linton.
Question, sorry. This square meterage of the use of the rooms, is this come under the planning?
So as part of our assessment of residential amenity, we have to be sure that whether any new flat or converted flat is of a suitable size for the number of bedrooms. So this does come into this. It's not the only consideration. We also look at windows and ventilation and privacy and natural light. They're more sort of subjective, I suppose, in terms of our assessment. But in terms of the actual floor areas, yes, this is part of our adopted guidance that we do look at. I'm wondering maybe you're thinking of HMOs where with the HMOs, the environmental health licensing team look at size for habitable rooms of HMOs, kitchens, living rooms, bedrooms, and we liaise with them on HMOs. But obviously, this is different.
Okay, Councillor Howells.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to pick up on Councillor Harvey's point and the response which Grant gave around Section 257. If the property doesn't comply with building regulations and is still self-contained flats, I'm sure Section 257 says it's then classed as a HMO because it doesn't comply with building regs. So we either need to condition that the conversion complies with building regs, or we treat it as a HMO if it's not going to comply. So I think we need to know the answer to that.
I think if it was then classed as a HMO, that would be a change of use in planning terms. So we would require an application for the change of use to a HMO. So then we could make an assessment of the property as a HMO. Is that correct? Yeah.
So, Chair, just to clarify, if they can't get the requisite building control sign off for it, and the use has to change into an HMO, they have consent for 4 self-contained flats. If that use has to change because of the size requirements or anything like that, then they'll have to come back to us for consent for an HMO.
How would we monitor that then? Would building control do an inspection at the end and let you know? Surely you would condition then prior to occupation, building control was satisfied that the property complied with current building regs?
It's a standard on all decision notices, so there's a requirement on there to comply with all requisite legislation, not just building regulations. So we would pick that up either through building control or through our enforcement powers.
Councillor Linden, you want to come back? Microphone. Mike, please.
Sorry, I'm looking at the minute at habitable rooms directly off the street. I've just seen that flat 1, which is on the ground floor, entering off the street directly onto the habitable room without a break, a little hall or a passage. So I'm just wondering now whether this regulation that will be effective on the meterage.
Sorry, I didn't quite understand the question then. Sorry, Councillor. Would you be able to just repeat?
No, and I'm surveying now under WHQS2 and homes for fitness for human habitation and the like. And part of the remit, what I'm looking at is whether the habitable room is directly off the street. So when you open the front door, you're directly in the lounge. And looking at that, I think.
So the front, are you on about the ground floor here where my cursor is? So this is the lower ground floor. So this is access from the private garden at the rear of the property. Yeah, the door go. Yeah, that's the sort of open plan kitchen living area. Yes.
So, Chair, that's not unusual. Lots of houses have been built with front doors that go directly into a habitable room. I think there's a difference between sort of the Wales quality housing standards for affordable housing and what the standards are for private properties. We don't have those standards because they're not related to grant funding. So we use the SPG and other legislation, building regulations, licensing, whatever in order to ensure that those units are fit for purpose.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? No. No. So we go to the committee's vote and to vote on recommendation granted with conditions and subject to Section 106 legal agreements. All those in favour, please. Sorry, do we have a proposer for the recommendations? Do we have a seconder? So we have a propose and second. Do we have a vote on the recommendation, please, for? 2 and against? And abstentions? Okay, so that's against the recommendations. And that... Sorry? Reasons from... Okay. Okay, we now need a reason. Then could somebody please put forward a reason why they're proposing we refuse these? Okay, then the complicated part now, right? We need, as it's been refused, we need somebody to propose why it's been refused and to bring recommendations forward.
Well, I propose that we refuse the application on many grounds. Main concern is parking, residential, the capacity of living standards in the area is fulfilled. It's overcapacity. I believe is detrimental to the living quality of the people living there already. I understand the proposals for off-street parking at the rear of the lane. I don't think it's sustainable. I think it will not give it the outcome that we're looking for. And I don't agree with the proposal of the standard of the living quality of the people going to live there. That's my main reasons.
Is there anybody willing to second that?
Is this a new process, Chair?
No, if you haven't, if it hasn't been passed and it's been refused, we have to come forward to why it's been refused.
Right, okay, so we've heard from one councillor why it's been refused.
Yes, so we have to have a seconder. Sorry, okay then. We can either have a seconder or we can open it up to debate.
I will second it.
Okay then. Now do we want to debate it? Okay, we'll now pass it over to Tracy, who's going to talk about on the reasons of the second proposal.
So obviously, Councillor Jones has helpfully provided some reasons for refusal. I think the presentation you've had today and the report before you doesn't give us the sort of the evidence to support those concerns and those reasons. So, members, you know that you're able to make decisions as a collective. But my advice to you is if we went to appeal on this, we would likely to lose that and we could be liable to costs. But I have to say that, as you know, I'm not trying to change your views or anything, but I just need to make that point. There isn't a highways objection to this. We've told you what the standards are in terms of our adopted SPG. I just need to point that out to you and advise you on those matters. So thanks, Chair. I can't say any more on that.
Right, okay. We now, does anybody else want to speak? Councillor Mockford?
I just want to, it seems to be making it very difficult for us to go against the councillors' recommendations. We've had a vote. Normally debates are held before the votes, not after the votes. So I'm a little bit confused about the process, but then I'm new to the planning.
Okay, I'm pleased. Do you want to?
It's just whenever something is refused against the recommendation, there's no problem with that, but we have to have clear reasons why, and the councillors have to put forward those reasons for refusal. Those reasons have to be agreed and just voted on, so it's just the procedure.
But what we've done is we've had a proposal and a seconder, and then a call to go to a debate. Is that what we're looking to do now, or can we have a vote on Councillor Jones's proposal?
Okay.
And who is it to call for a debate? Is it the chair?
I've been advised that if the proposal there, we need a list of the proposals, and then it can be discussed before we go to the. Yeah. So, okay, right. We did, Councillor Jones made the proposal. We did ask for a debate, but then your good self seconded it, so that debate is now stopped. We now need to confirm the proposal from Councillor Jones and then vote on that proposal. No, I don't think so. So can you just confirm why your reasons for refusal?
I'm sorry. you've not recorded what I already said and logged down. Have I got to repeat what I just said, have I?
Yeah, we've got it.
So just to clarify, I've got lack of parking, unacceptable residential living standards, unacceptable living quality of the people that will be living there.
And I think I said overcapacity of the living area. I mean, the residential area at the moment is at full capacity, and I understand, with my experience, I must be able to express my experience of sitting on other planning committees where HMOs are in the area. We have gone over the 10%.
It's not an HMO, so I need to
I know
really...
that, but I'm on about the capacity, which you didn't list, which I did say in the first comment, and you didn't highlight that I commented on, so that was missed off. So when I say about overcapacity in the area, I must be able to express my concerns that because of HMOs, I believe I'm right to express this concern. Am I not right?
But we keep talking about HMO and it's not
No,
a HMO.
I'm just on about overcapacity in the area, which wasn't listed in my first, well, I did say in my first listings of reasons. So I did say about overcapacity in the area. And my reference to HMO was only because of my previous experience in the area, knowing the area, of capacity of living quality. So where we look at these flats, not HMO, I know, flats, it is increasing the capacity of the area in living numbers. So it does have a detrimental effect.
Can we let the officer come back then, please?
So just as a point of clarification on the reasons that you've given, what is the concern or what is the impact of that overcapacity? Because that's the sort of information that we're going to need to put into the reason for refusal.
If you know the area, obviously there's a lot of streets, side streets, and it's a built-up area. And the school's over capacity, you only got to go down to the shops area, it's busy, there's litter, there's everything's going on in the area. And I just think changing the use of this house to increase the amount of people living there is not what the area deserves or requires. And I think at the moment, with the capacity, I keep going back to living quality, I think it's sustainable as it is. It's just going in a negative way. I think it's detrimental to the living quality to the people already living there. And the parking issues, there's no park on Clean Road. You've got to stop. If you travel going up and down, you can't go up and down. You ask your bus drivers, it's a horrendous road to travel up and down, like many roads in Newport, I'm sure. But this road on Clean Road, they're parking on the paths already. You can't walk up and down with prams side by side with adults. You can't get two-way traffic moving. It's horrendous. I lived in the area, I work in the area, and my personal experience is it's oversubscribed. We don't need more people living in the area, changing these houses to accommodate more people living there. We might need new housing along the riverbank, but the change of use, I disagree with.
Yeah, Grant, can you clarify what the bedroom numbers were before?
Yeah.
And are now?
So, just to make a point, the existing, there's two flats. They've both got 3 bedrooms each, so there's 6 bedrooms at present. The proposal is for a 1-bedroom flat, a 2-bedroom flat, and 2 studio apartments, which is a total of 5 bedrooms. So, in terms of the number of bedrooms from the existing lawful use, which could be undertaken without needing planning permission, and the proposed use, there is a net reduction of 1 bedroom within the building.
So, well, thank you for the information, obviously, but generalising, I'm looking at the change of the building, the structure of the building internally, the way it's going to be used. The parking is my main concern in thereafter. The lane and the parking at the rear, I will challenge you to get 3 cars down that lane to park next by each other in that area safely and without any health and safety to anybody living in the area. All right, your living numbers might be decreased, but there's many issues I've got against this proposal, this application. But I would like to note that I feel I've represented myself, I've given you reasons, I feel like I'm being interrogated and grilled on this issue now, so I am not happy with this continuing.
Yeah, I don't think that's the intention, Councillor Jones. I think we're just trying to get to the reasons, what we have to put forward to as a committee to, and so we're just trying to word it correctly so we can vote on it and then for or against. Councillor Reynolds.
Thank you, Chair. Like Councillor Mogford, I'm new to planning, and this process is slightly catching me on the hop as well. So I just would like to clarify, if I can, exactly where we are. I've raised some concerns similar to Councillor Jones and a few other people in here. We've raised concerns, and my understanding at the moment is those concerns are based on our opinions of what might happen or what could happen as a result of this being granted. Whereas, am I right in thinking that where the officers are coming from at the moment is based on the legalities and the facts of the numbers of rooms, number of houses, number of cars, and etc., etc. So, am I right in thinking at the moment, although we have genuine concerns, in law, if it goes to appeal, those concerns are likely to be dismissed and we would likely lose an appeal? Am I understanding this correctly, that our concerns are based on our opinions of what might happen? You're coming more from a standpoint of facts, figures, and legally this won't stand up. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. I mean, absolutely, Councillor Reynolds. You know, the purpose of Planning Committee is for you to bring your experience, your understanding of local issues and local impacts to committee to make an informed decision, you know, based on the information that we present to you. You know, the reason for us really trying to understand what it is it sits behind the reasons for refusal is because we need to be able to be sure that we've got the evidence and the technical support from our consultees to defend that reason for refusal. So my comments earlier were saying that there's no highway objection in terms of parking and access. You know, and obviously there's other regulations available to cover other bits and pieces. And as Grant's clarified, there's actually a reduction in the number of bedrooms. So we're going to find it difficult at appeal to say there's an intensification of use of this property, because in theory, and in number terms, there's actually a reduction in the number of bedrooms and potentially the number of people that could live there. So that was the point we were making. But, you know, we've always been very clear that it's a committee-led decision. You know, we're just going to have to take this away and pull it into a planning reason for a refusal based on, you know, members' concerns and issues.
Okay, Councillor Mark, I know you've got a hand up, but I've just been advised that we need now to vote on this.
I'd just like to say, as a committee, I think we're very lucky to have someone who knows the area well, and we must take into consideration the other objections that have come in. And we've listened to the councillors who live, two of the councillors that live in the area, who've taken the time to come here and explain their concerns. So I hope that the planning...
I've been brought up in the area, but I am accommodated. But you know, proposal has been made. We now have to we confirm what the proposal is. We now have to vote on the counter proposal.
And just for process clarification, Chair, do you vote?
I do, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so on the counter proposal now, can we please have those in favour? In favour of your proposal. We are now, just to clarify, we are voting on to refuse on Councillor Jones's proposal. That's 5 against. Sorry, 5 for. Those against? 4 and 2 abstentions. So we go with Councillor Jones's proposal, yes?
Hold on.
Wait, one sec. 5 for. 4 against, 2 abstentions. Yeah, okay. So that is Councillor Jones's proposal has been passed. Okay.
So the application's been refused, Councillor Mockford.
Okay, now we now go on to item number 3. Hopefully it's going to be a little bit clearer than that. So item number 3, applicant number E22/0147. And this will be presented by Joanne Davison.
Thanks, Chair. I'll share my screen. Okay. Councillor Jordan picked this up initially. This is a different report to what you normally see. You don't see these all that often. So, as Tracy confirmed, it's an enforcement report. So you will ordinarily see a planning application report, something for most likely a proposed development. This actually relates to development that has already occurred without the benefit of planning permission. It has been the subject of a complaint to us through our normal enforcement processes, and we have investigated, again, in accordance with our normal procedures. By way of background to those who aren't familiar, when we investigate an enforcement complaint, the first question we ask ourselves is whether the development actually needs planning permission. If it doesn't, we'll close the case. If it does clearly require planning permission, then the next step for us is to make contact with the developer to see if we can reach some sort of remediation or secure its removal, or secure the submission of a planning application that would then go through the normal planning application process. The reason you're seeing this report is because we've been through those processes. We know it requires planning permission. We have approached the developer. We've actually spoken with the developer, and the developer has made it clear that they do not want to remove the fence, as is in this case, or alter it for their own personal reasons. Now, what that means is we then have to make an assessment because no application is going to be forthcoming and no remedial works or removal of the fence is to be forthcoming. Is it harmful to public amenity? Is it expedient for us to move on to that next step of formal enforcement action? We have, as officers, determined that it is expedient in this case, and this is why we've prepared the report that you have on your agendas. So what I'm going to do is take you through some photographs because it's now been called to committee by Councillor Morris because this is in the Liswerry ward. Because Councillor Morris would like the committee to assess this and come to its own conclusion on whether or not to agree with the officer's recommendation. So I'll take you through this now. For those who aren't aware of this area or aren't familiar with it, 31 Hampshire Crescent is accessed off Nash Road. As I say, it's in the Liswerry ward. Hampshire Crescent is characterised, you'll see this on the photographs now, bear with me, by what I would describe as post-war, two-storey, semi-detached houses. They characteristically have enclosed forecourts, enclosed by quite low brick walls and associated pillars. So, bear with me while I go back a second. I thought this might be useful, this slide, to put early on because as I say, we don't get these reports all that often at committee. So it's just a reminder for the members of what enforcement is. I won't read it out, but I suppose the key point to note is the fact that someone doesn't want to or doesn't apply for planning permission is not itself a reason to take formal enforcement action, and that's set out in that second paragraph there. So, the site and the breach. We can see it here on the right-hand side of the photograph. So as we've said in the annotation there, the subject fence is on the right. We're seeing what I call the back side of the fence. We do have quite a number of complaints for comparable development within the vicinity that are subject to open enforcement cases. And so it is possible, if not likely, that we will be preparing more reports of this type for comparable development in this neighbourhood. So, but today we're just looking at the one on the right. This is the street, for those who aren't familiar with it. So going back to what I said about that character, the context, generally we've got those lower brick walls and pillars. Quite a pleasant street scene because of the layout and the space that those forecourts afford. Again, taken from a slightly different angle, and we're picking up on this point I mentioned, that we do have a number of other enforcement cases in the vicinity for fences. We're seeing one on the left side of this photo, so that's actually currently subject to an open enforcement case. The one we're looking at today, though, is on the right. You can just see the back side of it. Again, some more context photos showing the committee, the character of the area, and to hopefully help you in understanding why we've expressed concerns about the impact of the fence on visual amenity and the street scene. Again, a few more photographs of the general environs. And again, the fence that we're looking at today on that photograph. Looking at it from the other side now, so you would normally travel this way along Hampshire Crescent when you turn off Nash Road, and that's the fence. And again, just a wider shot there. So the issues to consider, or that we have considered as officers, we know that, and members probably know, that the Town and Country Plan in General Permitted Development Order permits means of enclosure adjacent to a highway up to 1 metre high. This fence is over 1 metre high. It requires planning permission. It's relatively new, it's relatively modern, so the 4-year rule doesn't apply. And so we can legitimately take enforcement action if we feel that it is harmful to public interests. So I've highlighted at the bottom there the process that we've gone through so far, which I summarised earlier. So we tend to issue what we call a 28-day letter initially to the owner. That really is to flag to them that they have undertaken development that should have had planning permission because they may not be aware. And in that 28-day letter, we ask them to respond to us, and we suggest a number of courses of action to remedy the breach. After that initial letter, the homeowner did contact us and confirmed that they could not reduce the fence and did not wish to remove it. They also felt that they shouldn't have to remove it, as they felt it was acceptable. So on the 12th of July, you can see, again, we went through our normal process. We then issue what we call a 14-day letter. So we ask that within 14 days, you can see there that they submit a planning application to retain the fence, which they can do, or reduce it to 1 metre high. And we had no further response from the homeowner on that. So you were issued with a late representation report yesterday that did relate to this case. The comments that were included in that are from the complainant. You know, as a committee, that enforcement complaints are confidential. The complainant is aware that their comments obviously make it fairly obvious who they are, and their anonymity is waived. Options for the committee. So we've set out in the report what our concerns are. We think the fence is incongruous in that context. We also have some issues regarding loss of visibility to the neighbouring driveway, which could have wider implications for public safety and passers-by on the adjacent pavement. So there is a twofold concern, so the appearance and the safety. Personally, my biggest concern is one of amenity and the appearance on the street scene. The recommendation is to issue an enforcement notice requiring the reduction in the height of the means of enclosure to a maximum of 1 metre within 1 calendar month of the notice coming into effect. We think that's the minimum necessary to remedy the breach, having regard to what the homeowner can do under permitted development rights anyway. Committee can either agree with us based on what I've just presented, or they could disagree entirely and consider the fence is acceptable as it stands. Or the committee could say, well, we agree it's not acceptable, but we want to change the requirements, or we want to change the compliance period. For example, 1 month isn't enough. We think they should be given 3 months to reduce it in height. So there's the 3 options available to committee. That's probably all I'll say for now, Chair, but obviously happy to take questions as usual.
Okay, thank you, Joanne. The Ward Member, Councillor Alan Morris, was meant to speak, but he isn't available. So I'll open it up. I will ask Councillor Howells if you'd like to come in first as his ward.
Thanks, Chair. I did declare my interest in this matter earlier. I've been involved with both parties, both the complainant and the person that's erected the fence, and also met with the planning enforcement officer on site. So I have some knowledge, which, if it's okay with you, I'll share. If you walk within a quarter of a mile of the property either way, there are numerous fences of similar sort of setup and ilk right the way around. The planning officer sort of says to me that lots of those are immune from prosecution now. They've been there sort of over 4 years and they can't be looked at. There are a number of recent ones which Joanne alluded to as part of the report, and there are others in the wider area of Liswerry in any event. My sort of fear is we're in the middle of a bit of a neighbour dispute, to be honest with you. Very often these things wouldn't sort of surpass and get to this stage, but the neighbours don't particularly get on very well, and we're sort of being used as a stick to sort of beat each other with, I guess, in terms of making a decision. And that's why I support sort of my colleague Councillor Morris bringing this to Planning Committee for a fuller decision. One, because I think it will help the planning officers determine some of the other applications which they're dealing with at the moment, both in terms of enforcement. There's also an application somebody's put in for a fence directly opposite, and there are some particular circumstances in that one which I won't go into now. But so we're potentially setting a precedent here. So sort of all colleagues felt it would be helpful to bring them out to the planning committee, have a full debate on it, give both sides the opportunity to make some representations, and I know the one side has. There is a sort of a separate report which came through, sort of late representations report as well, which sort of added some further information, and there were some comments from the planning officers around actually whether the fence encroaches on one part of the side anyway, and that being the case, it potentially could mean that both residents get served with an enforcement order, I think, if I'm reading your report correctly. So we're right in the middle of, a sort of neighbour dispute, which is really difficult to resolve. It's something which, in terms of the other areas, we can't do nothing about, but we can do the new stuff. The particular resident who was the subject to enforcement action here potentially outlined sort of 31 fences within about a quarter of a mile. So went and walked the dog and give poor old Paul, the planning enforcement officer, sort of a list of 31 applications to go and have a look at, which is, you know, not expedient in terms of sort of, you know, planning officers' time to be going and dealing with all these when there aren't really complaints. So for me, because we're right in the middle of a dispute, we're never going to sort of get a win-win situation out of this, and one party's going to feel aggrieved. I think there is a compromise, and I know that Paul was looking at that with the resident in terms of an option is to sort of the whole fence right the way across the boundary is about sort of 6 foot, 1.8 metres. If it was moved back by a metre and dropped for that first metre that is sort of next to the highway, that would alleviate the concerns in the report around the pedestrian sort of safety and access and egress from the driveways. So my proposal, bit premature, but my proposal would be that enforcement action is taken to remove the first metre of the fence to make it safe for access and egress and pedestrians. Thank you.
Yes, I suppose Councillor Howell's comments there come under that third point, or that third option I've raised. My own view is that doesn't resolve the need for planning permission, strictly speaking. Because taking it back a metre, in my view, wouldn't necessarily take it out of the definition of what is adjacent to a highway. That's a matter for us as a local planning authority to determine. And I suppose it comes back to what I said near the end there, that my personal view is the main issue is actually one of visual amenity and the appearance of the fence, rather than the safety angle, although that is a concern also. So appreciate that is an option to put forward alternative requirements, and I understand why you're doing that. But I don't feel, from an officer perspective, that would address our visual amenity concerns.
Councillor Markford.
Yeah, I think I agree with the officer recommendations, and as an analogy, if you're caught speeding, you can't say, well, lots of other people speed, so I should get away with it. This fence appears to be in violation of planning. And therefore, you need to enforce the rules. That's my view. I'm not quite sure, though, with a fence that is adjacent to the road, how far back? So if that house was back 30 metres and they had a 30-metre fence, say, how far back can you go? Is that a matter of law or interpretation? And you're smiling.
Oh, the all-important question we've been asking ourselves for decades, probably. It's one of those questions in planning that there is no answer. So whereas we'd normally turn to case law, where the High Court has tested this issue, there isn't really anything that helps us. The key point is, I suppose, to take a reasonable view as a planning officer. It is for us as a local planning authority to determine. In the past, we've said, for example, something that's more than about 2.5 metres from the highway. Probably difficult to argue whether that's adjacent. The thing with this one is, I haven't measured it, but I'm guessing it's around 5 metres along that side boundary, judging by the car that we've got parked there. It's a single development. It's a single entity, and that's why we are asking for the entirety of it to be reduced. So the whole fence, which has been developed in one, is adjacent to the highway, and the whole lot should be reduced to 1 metre, in our opinion, and we think we can robustly defend that. I mentioned defending it because the issue of an enforcement notice can be subject to appeal in exactly the same way as a planning application. So the homeowner may, if members were minded to agree with us, the homeowner may want to appeal and raise exactly the point that you've mentioned, that the requirements are excessive and lesser requirements can address the harm. But the requirements we've set out are the ones we feel that we can defend.
Councillor Jones.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Looking at the photograph you got there and what you presented so far, it does look like a barrier. It looks like somebody's just literally put a barrier between neighbours. They might be in dispute, whatever. There's no other reason by the person who put it up, on safety grounds or any other grounds that they put it up. They just decided to do it. Because the one on the other side, I know it's a law enforcement, but it looks like it's part of like a safety barrier more, or it's right round the property more. But this just definitely looks like a barrier. But if I could just say as well, on one of the other previous photographs, there's a caravan. What's to stop that neighbour sort of put a caravan there, which is quite large? I know it's mobile and that's fixed, but they could take that down, just stick a old caravan there, old one, and where do we stand then, type of thing? It could escalate, couldn't it? But I am against this. It looks like a barrier. I know the other one's going on, but it looks a little bit more pleasing because it looks more around the building. But like I said, where do we stand with caravans if somebody wanted to dump a caravan there that never moves? Sorry, this is the question I had.
As far as the motivation for putting up the fence is concerned, obviously I'm sure the developer did have a reason for doing it, but that's not for us to analyse. As far as parking a camper van, parking a caravan on your own personal drive, it's not something that we can control.
Councillor Watkins.
Thank you, Chair. One is clarification and the other one is a question. Clarification, is the fence new, totally new, or is it replacing something else? Right. The other thing is, can it be refused because of the visibility splay coming off onto a highway?
Yes, highways are concerned about that. So it does obstruct visibility from both drives, the developer and the more so the next door neighbour. The only reason I mean, we have raised that as a concern in our reports to you. As I say, it's a twofold issue. It's the appearance and the impact in visual terms, but also safety. And the only reason I said safety was a secondary issue is just based on experience. In residential streets such as this, where traffic levels are lower, we do find it more difficult to argue that visibility issue. But notwithstanding, highways have expressed concerns on that point.
Councillor Jordan.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I know it's just a point of observation, but if he didn't have the fence there and put it at a 6-foot hedge, there'd be no questions to ask, really, because a hedge is not under a planning application at all.
Councillor Jones.
Sorry, do we have a different angle, the photograph facing the properties again, please? The only reason I'm asking that is because obviously the car's actually parked there, so when you pull off your driveway with a car, the height of that fence and where it comes to the edge of the pathway, when you drive your car out, you can't see pedestrians walking or cars until you actually get out. So there is a danger to life, health and safety reasons there. And I just see it as a barrier, I'm afraid. I'm not in a dispute, but it's a barrier. And if I was next door trying to drive out and traffic coming along, and it's on a junction which is elevating the situation, I would say health and safety is causing a blind obstruction to the driver exiting their driveway.
Councillor Linton.
Yes, Chair. Could I move on and accept the officer's recommendations, please?
Number 1.
Do we have a seconder? Okay. The recommendation is to support the enforcement notice. All those in favour? And those against? Okay, and that's passed then. Okay, thank you. The next item on is appeal decision page 61, and that's for information only. Okay, thank you all for attending.